and over and inspect it. Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Council informational meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Not too bad. How you doing?
Calling this meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting, Tuesday, October 27th, to order. First item on the agenda is the update from the Land Use Committee, meeting Monday, October 19th.
Thank you very much. We had a discussion about single-serve alcohol, and we also discussed revamping the or updating the peddlers ordinance, and that's about it to report from this end.
Any questions for Councilor Kiley? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next will be City Council open discussion. Do we have any items for open discussion today? Okay, I don't see any. I would like to bring up one, and that would be just a little discussion on the vote that we had last week on the hands-off ordinance. And I've spoken with a couple of you about this and haven't been able to talk to everyone about it, but I would like to have a little discussion about that to look at taking that ideal to a citizen's vote. It would be an advisory vote, just like what we did with the arena and that, but I feel that also it would give us as a council a much better ideal of gauging how the citizens feel about this type of an ordinance here. And if it was something that they wanted, I also feel it would give us a stronger argument at a state level on using our charter to take care of issues that we see here in our city as a problem. So I am just bringing that up to let you know that's something I would like to speak to a few of you more about and just gauge your ideals. Any comments? Councilor Rolfing?
I would agree with you. I don't know whether the best time to do it is right away by pulling it off on Tuesday, next Monday when we have our meeting, or wait until after the first of the year when legislature is in session so they know that we're working on this. Either way, I think this is one of those things that I'm not necessarily in favor of, if you will, but I think it should be discussed publicly, number one. And number two, this is one of those things that I think if it's best that the people impose it on themselves rather than us do it, if it's going to happen. And so I would speak in favor of doing it that way and allowing it to go to a public vote.
Councilor Karski.
I think we're talking about two different things here now. Councilor Anderson, you mentioned a non-binding advisory vote. You know, should the city council pass an ordinance banning the use of handheld cell phones versus, I think Councilor Rolfing is saying, should the citizens vote on having this ordinance completely? I think that the public would, on an advisory vote, kind of like the event center, you know, we voted for an event center. Well, when you voted, it was an advisory vote for the council to approve it. That could lead to some misperception, confusion, I hate to use that word, that people, well, we voted this in or we voted it out. And in reality, if it's an advisory vote, two totally different things.
And if I can respond to that, speaking with the city attorney, he stated that that would be about the way we would have to go about it. So I'm just taking the advice of the city attorney in that discussion.
And if I might, I think by an advisory vote, if you will, it will still give us a good indication of which way the general public wants to go, as it did in the vote for the event center. And it would behoove us to follow that lead if the city and the populace want us to do it that way. I agree with you, it's an advisory, but pretty well tells us which way they want us to go.
And the other thing is that it will allow us the opportunity to have that open discussion as a city to, make that kind of decision. I really do feel that the group that Councilor Offenbach represented is not done. The conversations I've had with some of those members, some of the people who signed, and that they're not done, and that they may go ahead and do signatures and everything too. But I still feel that, I guess this is myself, that this is a discussion that we should have as a city to see, where we want to go with our driving rules. I think everyone here can see, out driving in our streets, that they are getting unsafer. And, what do we do about it? Is it an ordinance like this, or is it more education? What do we do? But we need to have that discussion. And this is a good starting point. Councilor, excuse me, Kiley.
Thank you. I would encourage my colleagues to consider bringing this back for discussion. I hesitate to say for further discussion because I think the discussion was unfortunately cut off. And I do, obviously, I've stated my support for this. And as an example, the very next day, right here at 8th and Main, I'm at a red light and waiting, and my light turns green, and my habit is to always check both directions, even though I have a green light. I glanced to the left and saw a vehicle approaching at a fast rate of speed, so I waited, and they blasted through the intersection, cell phone plastered to their ear. If I had pulled out, it would have been the perfect opportunity to get T-boned. And not long after that, while driving 229 and 29 just around the city, had vehicles crossing the center line. One crossed over onto the shoulder with an abrupt turn back into their lane. Again, both cases, individuals on cell phones. So I don't think I should have to convince individuals that this is a distraction and it's a serious problem, and people have lost their lives. People have been injured severely, lifetime injuries. I would just encourage my colleagues to consider discussing this issue in earnest.
Councilor Jameson?
In regard to the advisory vote, I'm a little concerned of the bar that you're setting as to at which point do you decide to have an advisory vote on which item of importance and which ones do you not. That's what I'm concerned about. The event center was clearly an unprecedented amount of money that we were intending to borrow. Big discussion for our community, clearly. I think we did the right thing there. But I'm just curious, at what point do you call it that that's a discussion for us, or that's a discussion for an advisory vote? That's what I'm concerned about, is that start of a slippery slope, frankly. And I'm just asking more so, what are you using as your barometer to determine whether this is one of those issues?
If I may, I look at this as being a unique opportunity to bring up a discussion about safety on our streets here in Sioux Falls. I can't set a nominal figure to it like we could the event center, but what we can look at is saving lives, saving long time injuries, but actually, as we try to be more transparent, how more transparent can we be than to have a public discussion or more than one public discussion on this type of an issue that affects everyone that drives in the city? Any other? But Councilor Karski.
Kind of on the same subject, well, yeah, definitely on the same subject, but different tangent here. First of all, thank you to Michelle. I mean, you were contacted by this group, you worked hard. I think all of us spend time meeting with people individually, in groups, taking a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails. There was a lot of public dialogue between me and groups of people and individuals. So that discussion, while it wasn't held here in Carnegie Chambers, definitely was held. But, you know, Michelle really carried the water for them, and just to acknowledge that it's not an easy task when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to bring this before the council. I gave you a study that just came out yesterday from the Insurance Journal, and this study was done by AAA, one of the members that signed on the letters that we were given, and also I think Councilor Kiley's parent, the National Safety Council. If you look on the second page, it says, there are dozens of studies showing that hands-free devices are no safer than handheld because the brain remains distracted by the cell phone conversation. When I voted no to send this to second reading last night, and this is my explanation because I've been told you got to tell the public why you voted no. My reason for it is I've done my homework, I've met with the people, I've done the research, and my conclusion was all the public input in the world will not change what the studies have shown and borne out. We can have public input all we want, but it doesn't change the way what reality or the facts are. So I voted no simply because I didn't see a benefit to taking this to a second reading.
Councilor Kiley.
The National Safety Council does agree that hands-free, the distraction caused by hands-free is really no different than handheld, but you have to take a look at what percentage of handheld is used versus hands-free. And the percent of individuals using cell phones now, the majority still is a handheld versus a hands-free. And that's likely to change as individuals continue to purchase the cars equipped with the new technology. I guess my view is if I can eliminate, let's say it's a 50-50 split, and it's actually greater than that in terms of handheld right now, but if I could eliminate at least that 50%, it was well worth the effort.
Any other comments at this time? Thank you. All right, moving on to our presentations. The first presentation we have is Indoor Aquatic Center Project Update by the administration, but it looks like we have Director Kearney.
Good afternoon, City Council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. Appreciate the opportunity to give you a quarterly update on the Indoor Aquatic Center. We have our project team with us today, and so things are going really good out there, progressing very well, and so we'll go ahead and get started here. We just want to review our project goals that we identified early on for this project. One of those was to have a top-notch patron experience. The other one was to engage the community in the process. Again, we wanted to have it multi-purpose to really maximize the amount of usage that this new facility would get. We wanted to make sure that it was accessible to all. We wanted to make sure that we paid with cash. And then we not only wanted to preserve and enhance Bellerberg Park, but really make it better than it was before we started this project. And then finally, we wanted to secure private support. These pictures, I think, tell the best story of what's going on out on the ground on the site. The exterior walls and frames continue to take shape. As you can see on the picture on the left, and you can see the framing of the front of the building, which would house the recreational pool, with the larger, taller wall being the 50-meter complex. And then on the right side, you can see the brick veneer actually going on the building on the west side above our mechanical rooms for the 50-meter facility. And so brick is starting and will continue along the north side, and as much of that work is going to get attempted to get done assuming temperatures cooperate for the masons. This is another great shot of the 50-meter facility. I know some of you had an opportunity to tour this facility, but as you can see, the roof decking is going on in this particular picture, and I can tell you now that roof decking is 100% complete over that 50-meter facility, which then allowed the pool contractor to go in and start excavation on the 50-meter pools themselves. So this is a couple shots of the shallow end of the 50-meter pool. The picture on the left shows all the rebar and all the piping that goes in before you actually pour the slab of the 50-meter pool on the shallow end, and then you can see the finishing touches being put on the shallow end of the pool on the picture on the right. The contractor, Acapulco Pools, who is doing all the pool work, really are doing this in 2 big pours for the floor of the 50-meter facility. You'll see that the picture on the right is the actual covered shallow end of the pool, and the picture on the right is, again, the shallow end that's been poured, and then you now see them excavating for the 50-meter portion, or the deep end of the 50-meter pool. So what to expect going forward this winter? The building is on track to be enclosed for this winter. Thinking right around the Christmas holiday for that to be completely enclosed. They hope to have the brick veneer complete by December. The roofing is also intended to be complete by December. The 50-meter pool that you saw in those pictures, not only will the floors be poured, but will also the walls for that 50-meter pool will be completed in December as well. They'll begin window installation in December as well. Interior masonry walls will begin in January. All the structural and load-bearing walls that you see out there now are complete, and so the interior walls that are non-load-bearing will continue on into January. And then, of course, all the interior finishes will start in February as well. And then we'll also obviously move over into the rec pool once the 50-meter pool is poured. And then we'll continue to secure private support. And then the park improvements will also begin in the spring of 2016, at which time we'll also begin paving the parking lot as soon as weather permits. One of the things we talk about is engaging the community in the process. We did hold a neighborhood tour out there on September 28th. We had a couple dozen people that participated in that neighborhood tour. I think folks were very impressed with the facility. And then we also will be sending out our second quarterly newsletter, probably yet this week, that'll go out to the neighborhood to keep them informed of what's going on with the project itself as well. As a reminder, we do have our webcam up. We do have that going as we speak. It's always an opportunity for folks to be able to log on to that website to see and monitor the progress of this project. So the project timeline going forward is that, again, we hope to have the building enclosed by the fall/winter of 2015. We will be back to the City Council again in January to give you another quarterly update. Again, the park improvements would start in spring of 2016, and we're still on track to open this facility in the fall of 2016. Now I'd like to have Tom Huber come up from Finance to give you a little update on the project budget. Tom?
Good afternoon, councilors. Tom Huber with the Finance Office. I've got one slide in this presentation, but I promise you I'll catch up during the monthly report later in the meeting. So, as you can see, from the financial summary as of September 30th, the Aquatic Center budget was at $23.7 million. The council did approve the splash pad alternative. It was a supplemental appropriation to add $365,500 to the project budget. which now stands at $24,065,500. With the expenditures to date are just over $4 million that have been expended on the project, and now you're seeing that the construction costs are a majority of the expenditures as they will be going forward, which leaves the project with a balance of $20,029,000 yet to be spent to complete the project. If you look at the project and you look at some of the pictures and you've been by there, you probably look at it and like me and say, looks like there's a lot more than $4 million that has taken place. Just important to remember we have a time lag from when the work has actually been completed to when the pay requests are prepared by the contractor and submitted and processed by the city for payment. So obviously to date, to this point now, we've spent more than $4 million, but this is as of September 30th that had been submitted and paid. So with that, open up to questions.
Any questions for our Councilman Rolfing?
Yeah. What are the, I've got a piping. I see on your fourth slide or something like that, fifth slide, right there. What are the, you mentioned the piping and all that. What's it for?
Yeah, those are the return inlets that return the water from the filter system and the chemical treatment back into the pool. A lot of times those are also on the sides as well.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you'll see that as well, but in this pool, it's through the bottom.
It was amazing to me to watch the infrastructure underneath this pool, how much had to be there because of the weight of the water that's in there. It's amazing, just amazing. So I just wondering what maybe we're going to have a big whirlpool there with jets coming out of it. Sit down in there and enjoy.
Yeah, we were just out on site today, and actually they're gluing pipes together that big to put in the deep end to start being able to return all the water back to the filter system. So yeah, a lot of piping's going on under the pool slab.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Jamison?
Don, if I could, so the only feedback I get are people who kind of get their feathers ruffled when you say you're paying with cash. Could you please just add the word / no new borrowing? I think it'd help explain. I know I support what you've done. I get it. We're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but there's a lot of feedback that I get where people chuckle a little bit about, yeah, you're paying with cash, but it's borrowed money anyway. No new borrowing, no new debt service or something would just help. And I don't know if you can, because I get it, but it would help me with people who contact me and say it's a...
Appreciate the feedback.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Next on our presentation list is Public Parking System Financial Analyst by Matt Nelson, our Public Facilities Manager, and Phil Barron, the Walker's Parking Professional.
Matt Nelson, Public Parking Facilities Manager, and today I have with me Phil Barron from Walker Parking Consultants. He's going to be presenting the study that they performed for us over the past approximately 6 months. Before he starts, I just wanted to touch on a few things before we get into his presentation of their analysis. I just wanted to touch on our mission. I know all of you know what it is, but for anybody that may be watching, our mission is to provide parking for the downtown area, and that's for the employees, for residents, and customers that come downtown on a daily basis. We are an enterprise fund, meaning we are self-funded. We do not receive direct tax dollars from the general fund or from government. Our fees and our lease payments pay for our operations and our facilities. We are required to be self-sustaining, and that is for maintenance. So the upkeep of our ramps, the sweeping, the snow removal, repairs, and then also for growth, which is a little unique compared to some of the cities that you'll see in our comparable set of cities. So some of those cities may have slightly lower rates than us, but they are not charged with building new ramps. So that's where we're unique. We are charged with both maintenance and growth. In those cities, they would use their general fund to build the new ramps, and then the parking facilities would take it over and maintain them. And it's our goal to maintain a balance between the needs of downtown with economic development, providing good value to our customers and users, and to maintain a fiscal solvency in our system. Just to touch on when our last rate increases were. In 2004, we had our last overtime citation increase from $3 to $5. So that was a fairly controversial jump at the time. And at that time, they also initiated the courtesy citation program. And now approximately 16 to 20% of our citations that we issue are courtesies or warning citations. And those all have a big impact on our revenue. In 2004, the Phillips Avenue meters increased from 60 cents to 75 cents. So it's been nearly 10 plus years since we've had an increase there. And our general street meters, their last increase was in 2008. Lease parking, we did have an increase in 2009. It was approximately $5 per location when you spread it out across several locations. And the last one, which was not a rate increase, but I would consider it a decrease, we offer free parking now on Main Avenue as part of the Main Avenue diet. That was initially meant to be temporary, and it's been extended now, and that does have an impact on our revenue. In the long term, we will turn that over to pay stations is our plan, but it does have an impact on us, and it is a very busy area that gets heavily utilized by customers. Changes in our system, some big ones to note. Recently, our last ramp was in 2000, the 8th and Dakota ramp, which is now nearly 100% full. I believe it's 98 or 99%. So we're actually pretty full in our system. If you see our current occupancy is about around 91%. We're diminishing our ability to increase revenue through growth in our system. We just don't have the spaces to continue leasing because we're filling up. We had the river ramp removed in 2012. And we took it down because it was at the end of its cost-effective life. It was in a dilapidated condition. We had steel plates on it to cover holes. We had temporary supports holding up some of the double T concrete. And it was time for it to come down. It wasn't a handout, or it was simply at the end of its useful life, and it was taken down as a result. And we've seen considerable growth. In 2012, we were at 67% occupancy. That was not a loss of customers. We had customers that shifted into a new building, and the parking went into private hands. So essentially, the amount of parking stayed very similar to what it was. It just went from public to private use, and now we're having the demand again on the public system. And like I said, we're currently in our 90s percent as an occupancy rate. We continue to invest in our system, so we're adding conveniences for our customers. We're adding better maintenance programs as we go. We'll continue to do that, and that's costing us money, and we have not done any inflationary increases to help offset that. We've done it through efficiencies in our system, but we're starting to run out of efficiencies to create, and inflation is beginning to catch up with us. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Phil Barron. He's from Walker Parking Consultants.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Phil Barron. I'm with Walker, and I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on what we've been doing here with the rate modification analysis. Just to go over the goals, we know that pricing is sensitive, especially when you're talking about a municipal asset. But in the context of an enterprise fund, where the charter is to be self-sufficient, it's a very equitable system where those who use the asset pay for the asset, and it's not something that community at large pays for. But still, there are sensitivities within that context. You got to be careful because we want to maintain the economic vitality of downtown. It's a balance between the price of parking, the price of commercial real estate. It can definitely impact occupancies downtown. So, with that said, our goals were to help improve the use of the public parking system. That means look at the pricing structures that are in place now. Are there any opportunities to adjust to induce demand in areas where there's low occupancy and manage the demand in areas where there's higher occupancy? We also wanted to look at the enterprise fund and make sure that we're looking at pricing strategies that support financial solvency down the road, because they do have to maintain, as Matt had mentioned, operating expenses as well as future capital investments. So that's the goal of our study was to hit on those key items. There were other considerations. Supporting economic development, what does that mean? Once again, it's hard to define. It's more of a qualitative analysis. But that's where, you'll see when I talk about our approach, we looked at other communities, the policies and rates that apply in those communities, how they compare to Sioux Falls. Are there any opportunities to hold rates steady and still maintain financial objectives? And you'll see in the numbers that I show, when we mention rate adjustments, we just don't assume all of them go up. There are some rates that we actually reduce because there are facilities that are underutilized, and so it just doesn't make sense from a supply-demand standpoint, pure economic perspective, to raise rates in a facility or an area where demand is already low. So how do we induce that demand, encourage that demand, and encourage better use of the system as a whole? And through doing that, improving access to downtown, that supports economic development. The approach, 4 key steps. We first developed a financial model for the system. It's important to understand the products and services that are offered, the demand for those products, the price points that they're at today, so that when we model, we can see the impact that pricing has on demand for those products. For example, monthly parking. There are premium monthly parking products, and then there are low cost at $32. When you raise rates in one area, do people leave the system, or do they just switch to a different product, a lower price point product? That's what the model was doing. So that was our first step, is to get a full understanding of the operating model. The second is to look at comparative rates at other communities. Now, these communities were identified by parking, and what we did is pulled their rates, current rates as is, as well as looking at their parking system. Now, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Lincoln, Nebraska, Rochester, Minnesota, Sioux City, Iowa, and Rapid City, South Dakota are all different cities from Sioux Falls. Parking is a reflection of the economic activity in the downtown area. And out of that sample of 5, there's a noticeable difference between those, but they do have public parking, they do have parking ramps, and we felt that it's a reasonable, geographically significant sample. So the rates that are compared to Sioux Falls represent that sample. And that also gave us parameters, which was good to know, because we could come in here and say the objective is to have an optimal financial model. Well, we could increase rates by 50%, and see a radical decrease in demand. But it would be out of line with the comparable set. So that comparable set gives us kind of bookends of high and low within the region to help keep us true. And you'll see in the numbers we show that we honored and respected the sample. From that, we developed scenarios, a base case scenario and an upside scenario. What I'll be presenting to you today is the base case, which we feel are moderate adjustments. The numbers will reflect that they aren't exceeding inflationary expenses. It's kind of a correction over the last few years. As Matt has shown on the previous slides, rates haven't been increased for monthly parkers since 2009. So there's some time that's elapsed where there's been some margin compression that's occurred, where expenses have increased while revenues have remained fairly flat. Okay, this slide is busy, and I understand the important part I'll share with you is the right column with the variance. We have the sample of all the cities here, and we define them as the high and low prices that they offer for ramps. Some of those high prices are reserved or premium parking. The low represents your general monthly permit. For monthly lots, same thing. We define them high and low for each community, daily rates, and then on-street we define between the core downtown area and then the fringe or the non-core. The rates from the sample are significantly higher. I would say $16 to $19 above what Sioux Falls is charging would be material in this case, because we're only talking about rates in the realm of $67, $37. So when we see an increase or a sample that has the average rate that's above Sioux Falls by $19 and $16, it jumps out at us. Does that mean there's an opportunity there to increase rates here while still being within an acceptable range of these comparable cities? It all has to do with supply and demand. And what was shared earlier, at 91% occupancy, there may be an opportunity there because demand is so high right now for rate modifications in some of the ramps. Parking lots. Now this one, it's the opposite. We're seeing here that the rates here in Sioux Falls are actually above the sample. And the question would be, well, why? Why is that the case here? It has to do, like any piece of real estate, location, location, location. And these lots here in Sioux Falls are in prime locations where demand is high. And so you can price accordingly. In the sample that we have here, there are fringe parking lots on the outer areas of downtown, so they're priced lower. So the fact that Sioux Falls is higher by $10 roughly than the others isn't a sign that it's overpriced. It's just reflective of the local market. The daily rate is approximately $2.30 below the average, and then on-street in the core is approximately 19 cents, and then the fringe or the non-core is in line with the sample. We also looked at overtime rates. Now, within our financial projections, we did not calculate how many people we believe would violate the parking code. Some communities, they view that as predatory. If you're going to budget off of the hope that people continue to violate, it's probably not the best policy. And so in this case, we held back and we just wanted to show a comparison. And as you can see, the high in Rochester, Minnesota is $17 for an overtime violation in comparison to the $5 here. The next closest to Sioux Falls would be Cedar Rapids, Iowa at $7.50. But the average of the sample is $10.70, and so we're about $5.70 below. So what that tells our team when we were looking at this is there's an opportunity to increase that. But even more so, we needed to step back and say, is it working? Is the citation rate right now working? Is it fulfilling the purpose of changing human behavior? Or are people just considering the $5 the cost of doing business downtown? Because it's roughly $3 to $5 to park in a ramp right now. So you can choose to park in premium real estate on street for as long as you want, disregard the time limit, get a $5 ticket, or you can try to find a space legally within one of the off-street parking facilities and pay, and kind of remove that ticket anxiety. And so what our data and our observations show that there are employees that are continuing to park on Phillips Avenue and other roadways. And so there may be a need for a modification. I mean, that's the purpose for the on-street regulations. It's to ensure access to the downtown for all people and induce acceptance and following of the regulations. And if $5 isn't doing that, we see now from the sample that there's opportunity to increase it. The current pricing schedule. Now there are 12 different rates offered, and one may jump to a conclusion and say, is that too much? Are we not simplifying the system enough? But I'll look at it from a different angle and say, you're offering choices, economic choices, to a wide range of users, whether they're employees or visitors. Residents are now an emerging market that are coming into downtown and need to be considered within this. So there are 12 different permits, and that didn't raise a red flag with us. The weighted monthly average rate is $57. The straight average is $50. The high is $67 within the system. But I'm going to put a little caveat on that. There are a few, less than 1% of the supply, a few spaces that are premium reserved. And the calculation on that rate is approximately 1.4 times the base rate. Now that policy, the reason why we're not highlighting that as a high rate is because that policy may go to the wayside over time. from just a smart use of public resources, dedicating a space 24/7, it's just a poor use of a public asset when you can lease that or have somebody use it multiple times throughout the day. It'd be analogous to having a hotel and just reserving one room for one person for the whole year, and they may only show up 12 times a year. Now, obviously, it's used more often than that in a parking space, but from a policy standpoint, many communities are going away from reserving. The low at $32 is reflective of parking areas that are out of the core. The daily rate 3 to 5, as I mentioned, the core area is 75 cents, and I was involved back in 2004 when the discussions were going on about raising the rates on street in that area. And we listened to pros and cons at that time when there was going to be a quarter increase. But right now it's at 75 cents, and the outer area is at 60. Now this slide has a lot of information on it, but I just want to show that our pricing recommendations in the second column there, which we're calling Case 1, it maintains the price options that are reflected in the current system, and it's based on location. And we believe that value-based pricing model is appropriate going forward. There's no need to reinvent that. There's been purposeful thought put into it. And what that does is it helps manage demand. The lower-priced areas reflect parking locations that have lower demand. The higher-priced areas reflect areas that have higher demand. And so it's very, very logical. And as I mentioned earlier, the rate adjustments reflect increases and decreases. And we're based on data and based on just a very practical review of this information. There are some facilities that have low demand. So, for example, reducing the rate in the Washington Pavilion ramp, lower level and upper level, from 49 a month to 45. It's a small amount of reduction, but what it's doing is it's fulfilling our goal, which was to apply a policy to manage that demand. Oh, let me back up real quick. The last key points here: the proposed adjustments reflect an increase of a weighted average of about $5.28, or about 8.5% for the monthly parkers. So if we go back to 2009 and we do the calculation of what does that reflect year over year, it's approximately 1.4% increase. So that's still less than typical inflationary adjustment factors applied and actual inflation that has been experienced in businesses. So it's a modest increase of 5.28 per month. Now, when we looked at, I'm just going to summarize this, the impact. Here are the adjustments. And so when you're thinking about the price modifications, the key takeaways, I shared just a moment ago the 5.28 increase on average. The weighted average change, it's $57 now. It would go to $62.34. Once again, we thought about this in terms of the competitive set that we looked at. We thought about the local market, and there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of speculative discussion as well, and there isn't a need to radically shift the demand patterns by increasing rates so high that it causes demand to fall off. We want to be sensitive to that, and so we're looking at it more from the perspective of being wise stewards of the existing resources and making this correction now, as opposed to prolonging the hold period and then having a more radical adjustment. And that's when we see communities really have a lot of public discussion about rate policies, when you have to increase it by 25, 35, 45% just to catch up with the delays that have been made over the years. The low rate is $32 now. We have a low rate still for the market at $35. High rate go from $67 to 72. And meter adjustments, what we are modeling is essentially 75 cents for the outer, but then a quarter adjustment in the core area to $1. You know, and the question was brought up, well, why not make everything uniform? Well, on-street is different. There are areas where demand is strong and consistent, and then there are areas where very infrequently you see cars parked there. And having two rate structures allows for choice. You know, during the seasons when you're willing to walk and if you would like to pay less, you can park 2 blocks away from your destination in a lower priced area. If you want convenience and accessibility, you can pay the standard rate, the higher rate for the core area. So we believe that tier system is appropriate. So in conclusion, it's 90% occupancy rate. Really, that tells us, in the industry, people will say, well, if you're over 85, that means you're not charging enough. That's more of a private sector thought mentality. We have to season this with the fact it's a municipality. So 91% is high, and that's a sign that things are good right now. Things are positive, and we don't want to disrupt that. But there is room for rate increases with that type of demand. We also know that rates were last increased in 2009 and 2004, and there are opportunities to bring those back in line with current day levels based on the competitive set, and that allows the system to be in a good position to plan for the future and be positioned for economic development. As opposed to reactive, they can be proactive. And it allows the parking system to also have some flexibility right now. There's a strong need for parking, and there are a few spaces open in different locations. It's hard to find a consolidated amount, 50 spaces, 100 spaces. And with the pricing strategy that we're talking about, we're proposing, it allows the parking department to maneuver the demand into lower priced areas and free space open to help support continued economic development activity. Want to wrap it up?
So what to expect next? So we do plan to bring an ordinance forward that would be consistent with the recommendations from Walker Parking. That full study is available online on our website currently. We put that up today. So you can actually see case 1 and case 2 on there. We anticipate that that'll be late November, early December when we bring that forward. And if approved, we would move forward with citation and meter adjustments in early 16. Lease increases, we would look at mid-2016. We're thinking July. That would give the businesses some time to react. And then there would be some other miscellaneous adjustments in there that would be smaller. Our daily rate, we would make some changes. The way we would like to write the ordinance is, rather than having an individual rate at each location, we would have a system maximum rate. It would allow us some flexibility underneath it to make changes as needed. We would also adjust our meter bag fees, and we would add a lost ticket fee, which will appear fairly steep, but it's to catch people that abuse our system currently in some of our ramps. Specifically, residents downtown. We're starting to see more of an issue with residents that are staying in our ramp longer and longer, or they'll leave their cars there for a week at a time, and we would like them to pay for what they use and have their vehicles turn over. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Question from the council. Councilman Jameson.
Matter Bill, one of the conclusions you came up at the end of your presentation there was to maximize the economic development of some sort. Could you switch to the slide there? I shared my presentation with Councilor Carter. Yeah, that enables public parking to support downtown economic development. So in the end of the day, based on the same usage rates, what would all these changes amount to, dollar-wise?
Dollar-wise? We're talking about with on-street and off-street. This excludes citation, any type of.
Have you step up to the mic, so.
It includes any type of citation income, approximately $200,000 a year to the system.
And, just begs the question a little bit, I know that there's the plan for bonding for a $10 million new parking ramp, and that there potentially needs to be maybe more revenue to help support that. I mean, I mean, is this part of the angle here is to find a way to generate more revenue in order to sustain it better, or just?
I mean, well, the 200,000 will definitely not support the debt service
Right.
on that. So will it help towards the economic development? The answer is absolutely yes. Is it the sole reason? If that deal doesn't happen, it still positions the enterprise fund to do other projects that may not be as large as the one that's being considered, but it does position it. Is it the driver for it? The goal when we were brought on board was to look at, are there any corrections that need to be made? What's the comparative set look like right now? Are the rates that are applied right now for citation for staying over a time limit, are they correct? Are they, right for the community? Sure. Those were the questions we were asked. When we looked at, and I won't get into too much detail here, but the elasticity of demand, we increase rates by so much, there's typically a fall off of demand. And parking's a great model for that. You can see it right away. In our models, we did factor that in there, that we increase, and there could be anywhere from 30 to 40 cars that would potentially leave the system, meaning they'd find a quality alternative to driving downtown every day. Others may shift to a different product within the system. So, the average price per unit sold within the system may go down slightly as rates go up and we lower some rates and people move to a lower price point. So that's why when we did the analysis, we initially thought there'll be more income coming in than $200,000, but with all those adjustments that I just mentioned, and they're conservative measures, we're pretty comfortable with that projection.
Okay. Well, a couple questions then for Matt. Just two real quick. On the diet, Main Avenue diet, you say was extended. Extended because positive feedback that
absolutely. It's been a good program. I think it's been very successful for downtown. We definitely support it. Initially, we went in with the idea that it was going to be a temporary trial, and then it was extended, and it's gone for all of this year. Those spots on Main Avenue between probably the 200 blocks north and south are always very busy. So it's a great program, and the diagonal parking, it's a hit. But it does have an impact on us, but it does offer more options.
Okay, and then one last thing, the economic development or redevelopment of downtown, I think this parking has a huge part of that, and I appreciate the delicate balance of what really other markets are doing, but our downtown is flourishing and is very active, and I think this is a part of it. So I appreciate not jumping to the extremes and understanding that is a delicate balance. I appreciate that approach.
Councilor Karski.
If you could go to, I think it's page 8 of the comparative rate analysis. Bring that one up. Yeah, that one. Kind of looking at the psychology of maybe the visitor to downtown Sioux Falls, and there's always a fear of parking in a parking ramp, okay? And I don't know if we have some sort of pricing strategy when we look at parking ramps. Are we trying to get the businesses downtown that have employees to park in ramps and leave the street parking open and the lot parking? Because people are going to park here on the street versus up here somewhere. Can you address that?
Correct. Yes. What you just said about the psychology, and there's a hierarchy, and based on user group, the employees are going to want long-term parking. They don't want ticket anxiety during the day. They want consistency. Employers want consistency for their employees. And so by design, the system should have affordable parking with a range of prices available, so there's choice for long-term parking for those employees. On-street is intended for short-term use. Now, in some communities where visitor parking and it's plentiful and demand for restaurant, retail, and just general visitation to downtown is low, they're taking fringe on-street parking and turning it into long-term parking. Temporarily, it's a short-term fix. We need more employee parking. We'll use the underutilized on-street spaces. But by design, on-street is for visitors. And some communities right now are maintaining 3 hours roughly at a lower rate, about $1 an hour. And then after that, they don't have a cap on enforcing you can only stay here for 3 hours. You could stay there 24 hours if you want, but you're going to be paying $24 to park on street all day. So there's a rapid escalation. What that does is it encourages employees to park where they should, where it's affordable, as opposed to parking on street. It's allowing for choice, and it's taking away kind of a punitive approach to management, where we're going to penalize you if you stay longer than we're telling you can stay. You can stay. You're just going to pay. We're going to let the laws of economics determine your behavior, impact your behavior. But everybody in that 0 to 3 hour period still has a lower price point. So there are a lot of different strategies, but on street is for visitors, off street trying to get the employees there.
Thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
Thank you. A couple things. I agree with what's been said about the Main Street, or Main Avenue diet. Yeah, time to get some parking meters in there. It's gone well, and let's do that. That's great. On the river, when we talked about the river ramp, you talked about in what bad shape it was and things. Do we have any ramps that are anything close to that at this point? That we're going to have some major fix to do?
No, and we've looked at that and planned for that. I've got all the construction dates for all of our ramps. We know roughly when we should take them down in the end of their usable life. The next one that will be close is the pavilion ramp. We're probably looking at about 2047 on that one. It's a precast structure, so typically about 50 years on that.
Only be 98.
Yeah, so I'm sure you'll still be using it, and I'll probably have some new technology there by then.
You're good, yeah. On slide number 7, just a note, the little asterisks after Sioux City, Iowa, and Rapid City, South Dakota, what do those refer to?
Sure, I can speak to that. Yeah, it means that they subsidize their parking system through the general fund.
Got it.
And
there wasn't a sub-note anyplace on that, that's why.
No, sorry about that.
Good.
But yes, they do subsidize. And so, as far as it being a pure sample that's, the operating model is identical, no, these are the anomalies, and it's because their price points are low. And so when it comes to economic development, that's not even part of their mission, where you look at some cities, including Sioux Falls, but there are other communities out there that are starting to weave in. Tulsa, Oklahoma is one. They're weaving in being a tool for economic development.
Right.
And if they aren't investing and doing that, they're getting pressure from administration. You stay ahead of this. You help lead, and that's a little different than if it's a department. So the enterprise funds have a little more liberty to lean forward, and I hate to use the word risk, but take on a little bit more risk than a department would.
Sure. Next slide shows all the comparative rate analysis. Why is Rochester, Minnesota so high? Is all their parking next to the hospital and they can charge it?
No, the hospital, actually, Mayo has a very dynamic parking system of their own. They have a high rate for their daily. The $17, is that what you're referring to? Well, there's a $155, but there's also the $17.
The whole thing was kind of out of whack with most everybody else, except for the daily rate.
Demand downtown is really high, and the $17, their daily rate. And they have an arena downtown, and there are also some other activities where they don't want those folks parking all day, in their parking facilities. They want high turnover, and there are lots that are out on the outskirts that are designed for those visitors. So they're trying to keep high turnover in their parking facilities, and that's why it's high. But supply demand.
Okay. The other thing is, I noticed that our parking ramp our parking lots are fuller or are less expensive, or the variance, we're ahead of the game over the other ones, because people seem to use the parking lots rather than the ramps, or we're a little cheaper. But I would suggest that there may be another reason for that, and that is because we have such better weather than these other locations do, that they can walk. Don't worry about it being under the
Yes.
No?
No. You know, the lots here, and I touched on this, you know, really it's location. Yeah. Your weather is,
I'd like,
not
just
as
like
good
to
as
think it's
St. Paul
weather.
or Minnesota or Minneapolis or.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. Quick question. What input have you received from downtown merchants, or what input do you plan to seek?
We do have our Public Parking Advisory Board, and we did present this to them this morning. They were actually very supportive of this, and we do have retailers on that board. We actually were asked the question, are we asking for enough? Because when you look at the actual study, there is the upside case, and there's some concerns with the residents downtown, the employees on the street. Is there enough disparity between the core meters and the non-core meters? Should it be greater? So I would say that it should be received fairly well. I mean, no one likes to pay more. So we are going to hear some grumbling, I'm sure. But when you look at where we are comparative to other cities, we're much lower. I actually received a letter and a payment of a parking citation within the last 2 weeks from a gentleman from Worthington, Minnesota. It said, "Dear parking facilities, I'm including a check for $10, even though my parking citation was $5, because obviously, he basically said our rates are so low, I don't think it's covering your cost, and I just want to send you extra money. Okay. And I'd like to move to Sioux Falls because your rates are so low. Thanks." So
That was very nice of him.
it was.
And he can send more if he so desires. I would just encourage that you continue to have an open dialogue with the downtown merchants, and if it hasn't gone beyond the advisory council, that maybe they can advertise it further in a newsletter or something to that effect, so that they are apprised of what's.
Absolutely, and Darren is not here today. Darren Smith, he is actually with DTSF right now, and this is something that they are going to discuss briefly. They're going to talk about some of the things that are in here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilor Urfenbach?
Thank you. Question, Matt, for the Main Avenue Road Diet, how soon are we going to put meters on those spots, do you think?
We were hoping for early next year with the Main Avenue Diet that bid for the 200 block of South Main having 0 bidders. That has delayed that process. So we are going to implement those as it's redone. So we anticipate them with that project, which will probably be mid next year.
I forgot about the no bid thing. That's okay. So then my question is, are you going to count that as core, or is that going to be a periphery rate?
We are looking at expanding some of our core areas, and that would be one of them. The 200 block of South Main is very busy. We had credit card enabled meters on it previously. If you look at the 10th and 11th streets, a block off of Phillips, very busy. So those should be core meters. So we'll adjust those rates accordingly. We can actually do that currently under the ordinance, but we'll do it in one package deal when we do it all together.
I guess because I would agree with your advisory board that I'm not sure these rates are. I mean, I know we're trying to be nice, and I know we're trying to go easy, and I don't disagree with that, but I think we need to be really intentional about where we're headed with this, because again, it's all about being able to build that next, whatever it is we need to build. And so these prices are key to me, so thanks.
We've got the data now. I mean, we've been working with our finance team. We're able to see what our utilization is based on the money we take in.
Right.
Phillips Avenue, well over 80% utilization. The other meters, 20%. So we're beginning to look at that.
Yep, I think it's great. I'm all for it, so thanks.
Councilor Erickson?
Just a quick question about the new parking ramp coming up. How will the rates be impacted in that? Because that's public-private partnership. We can't enforce the rates to be a certain amount for their private side, but for our city side. So how would that play together with this? And I know it's not going to be done for a while, but I'm just curious if you could just address that.
So the ramp will be a public facility, a public entity. It will own it. The rates in there will be our rates.
All of them?
Yes, unless if there is a private area in there, it will be paid for by the private development, maintained by them, and that would be their area. As of right now, they're going to turn all the parking over to us. That's what we see happening, and it's just because we do parking. We can do it cheaper than they can. We have the systems built. It's just easier for them. We'll let them do the apartments. We'll let them do the hotels. So it's what they do well, and we'll do what we do well.
So we'll set our own rates, and because I know when we did the RFP, the rates were kind of discussed what they wanted to charge, what we thought should be right. Because I know we'd had a pretty lengthy conversation about how our rates are lower comparative to other communities. But that will be your department setting the rates with the help of Walker, I'm sure, and all of that. Okay.
In line. The rate would be set by the address. Currently, the rate would be set at our highest rate for the First Avenue rate, Block 11, and that ramp would all be the same. They're all within a block of each other. They're all high demand, and that's what we would try to charge the private entities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Staggers, maybe?
Nope.
Nothing? Okay. I have a couple questions, Matt. On slide number 7, you showed 91% parking efficiency occupancy rate. And that's the total of all of our ramps, correct?
It's our entire system. We lease 1-to-1. 91% of our spaces are leased currently.
Space, things like that. Are there any areas where the ramps or flat space are underutilized?
We have 2 locations that we have low utilization. One, which Phil pointed out, was the Washington Pavilion ramp. The other one is our D6 lot, which is behind the Shrine near 14th and First Avenue. So those are the 2 locations where we have our lower utilization.
So is that areas we're basically saying that right now it's not a major interest to add parking ramps in that area or any parking?
Correct. I mean, the utilization is not there. In addition to our parking, there's a lot of private parking with the churches in the area. So there's a lot of parking availability near the pavilion.
Okay. And then with the county looking at building a new jail, and part of that has been the city's been approached about building a parking ramp to replace some of the parking down there. How are we looking at that, and would that also fall under the same rates, or is that going to be something that we'll work with the county on to make sure that they have the parking they need?
So I actually meet with Kara Muller on Monday, and this is what we're discussing is their parking needs. Initially, we're going to look at their system just from an overview perspective. Is there anything they can do better? Can they better utilize their assets? And we'd love to collaborate with them, but once again, we are an enterprise fund, so that takes funds, it takes money. I'm happy to advise, help out, assist, provide recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's expensive, and we have our own system to maintain, but we want to work with them.
Okay. As you move forward with that, I'd like to request that you keep the council updated on that. I think it's something that could be of great interest to us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? Statements? Seeing none, thank you very much, Matt. Next on our agenda is Councilor Rex Rolfing and his proposed bump back ordinance.
Not bump and grind, bump back. Thank you all for being here and for listening to me. This is something that I've been looking at since I heard about it, probably during the first year as a counselor. And I've always thought it peculiar to the city why this kind of provision is in there, and I've always wondered why we didn't take a look at it. And so hopefully we can. If you turn to the next page, please, you'll see that what is this ordinance? Here's what the ordinance now says. You'll read along with it. Who are the appointees? As the first paragraph basically says that the term appointed officers, as used in this section, shall include the appointing of officers specifically provided for by statute of the state or other officers appointed by to fill appointed officers created by ordinance, executive order, resolution, as authorized by the state or the city charter. Currently, there are 26 people that fall into that category in Sioux Falls. And then the bump back provision is the next one, Part B of Section 39.036, which reads, anyone holding the appointed office who at the time of his or her appointment thereto was in the civil service of the city shall, upon his or her removal from appointed office, be returned to his or her former position and pay as an employee of the city for the period. Well, and then it goes on to the period of services is collected also. Next slide, please. My change is very simple, very simple. What it does is it grandfathers in existing appointed officials so that they play under the same rules that they were hired under. I think that's important. But it's really a small change. And as you'll see, anyone holding an appointed position on or before December 31st, 2015, which basically says anyone who's appointed after that date will not have the bump back provision. That's all it does. So everyone is grandfathered in that is currently in that situation. There are 9 people of the 26 who would fall under this part or this change. New appointees will be fully aware that this is of this update, so that they're no longer knowing that it's no longer available. So anyone appointed after on or after December or after January 1st, 2016 would not have this provision as part of their contract. My opinion is that the best person available should be hired to fill the position available, and we should encourage people within our civil service employee ranks to aspire to these appointed positions when they are qualified. And part of that qualification, I think, is that they know that they're taking on a management position, a high-level management position, and to be able to fall back is just not part of what I would consider management situations. Next slide. Benefits. Let's take a look at what the benefits of this proposal are. First, the appointed position should be equipped to take on or on that leadership role without a safety net. And literally, that's what this amounts to, is a safety net. Those appointed from outside the city's civil service system, they don't have that safety net. It would be what, 17 people who came on without this clause. They don't have the safety net. Maybe all of them should have, if any of them have it, all of them should have it maybe. The status quo discourages new leadership from outside the city government. New ideas are almost always good, aren't they? New ideas, new blood is good in a system. Department morale can be negatively impacted when employees are bumped by a former appointed employee, regardless of the bumped employee's performance. How is that fair? How is that fair when someone gets bumped out of the position that they came into because somebody didn't do their job some other place? Former position and pay of the appointed employee removed may not even exist within the organization anymore. If any kind of reorganization takes place, that position could be completely gone. And that could force us to invent a position for this person that we really don't need. And it may be challenging to have a former appointed director successfully serve new leadership within that department. This can have a very negative impact on department morale, as it has in the past. There's nothing in this change that stops. There's nothing in this change that stops an appointed employee from being rehired after the department, after they've been relieved from their duties as a department head, or go to another department. So if there's a department head that is relieved for one reason or another, and they want to be hired, the new department head wants to hire them, they may do so. They may do so. It's not stopping that. It just stopped the guarantee that they will fall back to where they were before. Okay? Let's look at the benefits to the status quo. Status quo promotes continuity within city departments by eliminating employee risk when he or she advances to an appointed leadership position. Almost all of these appointed leadership positions are high-level management positions, and that just doesn't come with the deal. When you take on those positions, you take them on, you're all in or all out. And to have a safety net behind you sometimes may preclude you from doing the best job you can and taking some of the chances, if you will, doing some of the new things that needed. Now, the only thing that I can see that could really be, I don't know, bad or whatever, but is political appointments after administrative change. May not be fair to have a new mayor come in and decide they're gonna clean house and get rid of everybody. But as you can see, it's about 1/3 that would be able to take advantage of this, and 2/3 of the appointed people that wouldn't. And again, how is that fair? Where 1/3 of them have a guaranteed job returning back to where they were, and 2/3 don't. These speak directly to the ability of the newly appointed director. Do we really want decades of internal promotions where there is always a fallback position, and if it does not work out, what do? New outside management should be looked at for each position as it becomes available, and the best person hired, and those who are internal should not have a step back on those, or step up on those who are hired from the outside, just because they have that bump back position. I'll be bringing this amendment to the council at our next meeting for its first reading. I would ask you for your support along with your vote. And lastly, do you have any questions? Yes.
Councilor Rolfing, thank you for adding that last page, the benefits to status quo. I would encourage you to add one maybe bullet point to that, and I don't see it in here anywhere else. It encourages, under our current system, potentially the best candidate to advance to that level. Simply, if they're coming from within and they can't go to leadership, or they're fearful about going to a leadership position, knowing that in 2, 3, 4, or how many years when the next mayor comes, they're not going to apply for it, and we could potentially miss out on the best candidate.
And that's what the first one talks to, is the status quo promotes continuity with the city departments, eliminating employee risks so that they can advance to those leadership positions. That's basically what that says, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I'm also looking at, we could be missing out on maybe the most qualified candidate that doesn't want to apply.
And my response to that is that if they are unwilling to take that risk, is that really someone we want in that position?
Fair enough.
Any other questions? Councilor Urfenbach?
Question, Councilor Rolfing, about the grandfather date. So those folks that are currently in these positions that have been appointed from within a department and are now in appointed positions, they could at this time, if they were let go from that director role, they could go back to whatever role they were in prior to that appointment. Does that change? That would change then at the end of this year, that
Correct.
Those folks that are currently in these positions, they were hired with the understanding that they could go back. Mm-hmm. You're going to take that away from people that
they would be grandfathered in. It's then only new hires on or after January 1st, 2016 that would not have the bump back provision in their contract.
So that is not clear in that slide because it says the grandfather would end December 31st, 2015 in the slide.
So we could hire somebody between now and December 5th and December 31st, and their contract would include the bump back provision.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. But when this is presented to I guess this is the full council, which is my next question, but is that we need to be very clear that those folks that are in those positions now were hired with the understanding that they had the bump back provision, and they will not lose that bump back provision no matter what.
If you look at page 3 right there, he's got it up there. Anyone holding an appointive office on or before December 31st And then it continues on with the regular statement saying they have the bump back provision.
Right, but look at the bullet point right above the blue box. It says that the grandfather would end after December 31st.
Right.
You've said these people are grandfathered in. Those 9 people are grandfathers that
Maybe it would
exist.
be-
And then you say they're going to end. That bullet just needs to go away.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Right? Am I?
Got it.
I feel like I'm swimming
Correct.
here. Thank you. Thank you for being.
Better wording might have been grandfathering would end after December 31st.
Current policy would end
Current
after.
policy, yeah.
Right,
that kind of thing.
exactly. And then my question is, Councilor Rolfing, is why did we not start with these kind of nitty-gritty things in a committee meeting rather than pulling pieces like this with the entire council at an informational meeting?
What committee?
Pick one, you know.
Well, it really doesn't fit land use and public service or fiscal. So I figured that it would be good just,
why wouldn't it work fiscal?
well, it could.
It just seems weird. We don't. Our tradition has kind of been to go through
Yeah.
committee, and it just
And I
feels weird
apologize for that if
No,
that's
okay.
something I should have done, but it seemed like pretty easy way to just go straight forward.
Councilor Kiley?
Well, actually, Councilor Erpenbach covered my point with the second bullet point there needed to be changed. Other than that, I would have preferred to have a little more color in the presentation, but I think that's the extent of my questions or comments.
When I make the presentation to the full council, you can count on it.
Any other questions? Councilor Jameson?
A couple of points here. First, this idea has been around for a while. Don't need to go on the details, I suppose, but what's kind of concerning to me is that it appears as though it's more of an administrative issue than a city council issue. Clearly, these people are working for the administration, not us. Yes, I haven't heard of a concern from their point of view stating that this is just something that's got to change. That's first. So the second is what I'm worried about most is all those employees who have risen through the ranks, know every nick and cranny of every corner of the city, great institutional knowledge, rises to the point where he says, okay, yep, and the mayor taps him on the shoulder, says, I need you now, and he steps up and does a great job as a director. The next mayor comes along and has a political appointee that he wants to do to pay back somebody, to give a gift, whatever it might be, and he replaces that individual who has all that great institutional knowledge, and that person is lost. And I'm concerned about that. You know, the argument of an individual not having the courage to step up to the position because they don't have a bump back, I'm not buying that. That doesn't work for me. If you remove the politics out of it, then maybe that works. But with the ability of the mayor to replace that individual because he has a bad hair day or he or she has a bad hair day, it doesn't work that well. And I have a problem with this, and I have a question then. On this slide that's up here, you have auditor, city clerk, fire, health. Why are those listed there?
Those are the people that are currently under the bump back provision.
The only individuals as directors who are under it.
There are 9 of them. There are a couple more. City clerk is one that's not listed up there. Oh, is she listed?
Yeah.
Okay. And the human resource system. Yeah, 2 in police. And I guess that's, the mayor's executive assistant is also included in that.
Okay, and the only 2 that really, I get, years ago, all these directors were advanced, moved up. That's just the way it was. As we've, gone through 2 administrations under this form of government, there hasn't been a lot of changes from that. Surely there's been outside people brought in from a national search of some sort. That's good. brings other things to light of good, but I'm just wondering if this is kind of working its way out. And the two that I am most worried about are the police and fire departments. And if it got to the point, I would probably make an amendment to exclude those two individuals, because you have a firefighter or a police officer who's risen through the ranks in that kind of a career. Their opportunities for moving from there to another career are kind of not the same. And having a good example is our own police chief rising through the ranks. For the political nature that still exists in this form of government, I would want those two, our public health or public safety, essentially protected from any political whim of somebody. So I'm just mostly concerned about those two. But
what I would answer to that is that I think it is always good to look at all the potential candidates you can have and choose the best candidate. When you are so inbred, if you will, that you are continually doing your, continually getting your upper management from within your organization, it can be very detrimental to progress within that. Now, I'm not saying that's happening here. I'm absolutely not saying that's happening here, either with fire or police, but it is a very strong possibility that new ideas are not forthcoming as much as they would be had you brought somebody in from the outside. This is why a lot of times you get corporations that bring in new blood so that there are new ideas, new ways of doing things, and very often things move forward from there.
One more.
if I could, I really didn't want to turn this into a debate about a lot of this, but really, I mean, you cannot argue with some previous recent history where an individual was appointed to be a director who had zero experience, and the person who was replaced had multiple years. Maybe that person wasn't the best person, you could argue one way or another, but to clearly say, just add a chilling effect, if you will, to the whole staff of the individuals below in that department who now have been working to do the best job they could ever do in that department, and to have it all of a sudden now have a new leader come in with zero experience. It's pretty clear now. You could be the best guy and do the best job for that division. It doesn't matter, because you could easily be replaced in the political nature. Mm-hmm. Until we remove that, I think you need some of this in order to keep those individuals aspiring to be the best person they can be in that job. That's just
two things I'd answer on that. If they're really aspiring to be the best person in that situation, they may be looking outside Sioux Falls to take their skills and their skill set someplace else. If they're really looking to do that, unless they're just sitting around waiting for the next chief to retire after 25 years of service, and then it's my turn. Secondly, I would point out to the interview that was done with one of our HR people in the paper today as part of the article that was there, indicating that this is really not an issue with those people anymore. They know that if they're going to do this, having this on there or off of there is not a big deal. They know the risks that go with it, and I think because of that, they'll probably do a better job.
Councilor from Bethel.
I just wanted to respond to a couple of Councilor Jameson's initial comments. One was that this is absolutely a policy issue. This isn't an administrative issue. It is an ordinance. It's policy set by the City Council, and Councilor Rolfing's proposal is to amend existing policy. The second thing that I would say kind of dovetails on what Councilor Rolfing just said is that we're really underestimating our folks if we're saying they're not good enough to move from Sioux Falls to somewhere else. You know, to say that if, for whatever reason, if it's political or not, that, and I hate to pick on police and fire, but to say that if a mayor who with a wild hair comes in whatever year, and they give the boot to the sitting police chief, that chief is so qualified coming out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that they could go anywhere And I don't think we should ever say that we're somehow putting a hamstring on these folks. These people are well-trained and they're amazing people, and we're lucky to have them, whether they came up through the ranks or not. Right. We're lucky to have the folks that work for us.
Whether we'd like to believe it or not, we're maybe not the pinnacle of where some of these careers could and should end.
Councilor Erickson.
I'm not sure exactly where I am on this issue or not, but yes, people come out of a job and they may be certainly qualified to go somewhere else, but it's not just that easy to say, okay, a new mayor comes in, replaces the police chief. I now have 3 kids at home and I have a husband at home if I'm in that role to take into consideration, and I'm not just going to pack up my family and say, oh, let's go be a police officer in Omaha now. It doesn't work like that. There's so much more into the consideration, and to think that a big life decision like that isn't taking place, I think is unfortunate, because it is a big decision. And I don't know which way I'm leaning on this at this point. I mean, definitely see benefits on each side of it. And I just hope that no matter what person is in what role, that they give it their all for the benefit of the citizens, and that they're working their tail off to benefit. I would hate to lose the knowledge of someone in a particular role with a new appointment and not have that. However, like you stated before, you can rehire, you can re-interview. There are other options available at that time too. It's not just like, oh, sorry, move on. There are options.
I would like to think that, especially in police and in fire, that if that did happen, that person would the new person coming in would be smart enough to understand that person is that has been unseated, shall we say, is someone with the knowledge that you want to keep around, and a position would be found for them so that they can continue with that.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Next presentation will be the September monthly report. Also, while we're waiting for that, I do want to mention that next week's meeting will be held on Monday, November 2nd, rather than Tuesday, November 3rd, due to councilors attending the National League of Cities Conference.
Good afternoon. Again, Tom Huber with the Finance Office. Here to present the September monthly financial report. You've already had several reports today, so I'll try to keep my remarks brief, but try to be thorough. And now on for some color and some color commentary, since Councilor Kiley requested some color. So, and it doesn't qualify as a Cotto graphic either. So as we do every month, start by briefly reviewing some of the key economic indicators that we follow. First is the unemployment rate for the Sioux Falls MSA, and the August unemployment rate, as you can see, is at 2.5%, which is exactly where it was last year at this same time. Now, since we are presenting a little bit later in the month, I did look ahead as to what September was, and September remained consistent with that at 2.5%. So, and obviously this compares very, very favorably with the unemployment rate, both at the state level and nationally. As has been the storyline for the last several months, building permitting activity continues to be going through the roof, so to speak. As you can see, the city remains well ahead of last year's record-setting pace through the month of September. Almost $546 million in permitting activity so far this year. It's exceeding the permitting valuation last year by $91 million, or just over 20%. So, especially strong in the commercial construction this year versus the residential. Economic growth for us all becomes reality when we start looking at sales tax collections. So through September, you can see we continue to enjoy a solid sales tax growth with a rolling 12-month growth, excluding audits, of 6.7%. That's up from the 6.5% rolling rate last month. Although we prefer to look at the rolling rate as to giving us a key indicator as to where we've been and where we're going, it's also noteworthy to look at where we are year to date. And so from an all-in viewpoint, on a year-to-date basis, sales tax collections are up 7.1% for the first 9 months of 2015. So solid sales tax numbers, I guess, essentially follow the storyline, the expected storyline, given our low unemployment, our high construction activity, and give all the indications that we all see every day that we have a very healthy local economy. Entertainment tax revenues continue their chart-topping performance, ending September with a rolling 12-month growth rate, as you can see, at 9.9%. That's September over September. Just slightly off last month's rolling rate of 10%. Certainly speaks to the health of our local economy as we look at the entertainment tax as being more discretionary spending from our consumers. On a year-to-date basis, the entertainment tax is at 10.9%, which includes audits. One of the things that I think will be very interesting is to watch how this tax performs once we've had a full year with the new event center open. So next year will be very interesting to watch how the entertainment tax performs. Likely to stay may stay very strong, but we'll see what next year brings. As we look at the performance of our two primary operating accounts, our primary operating account, the general fund, you'll notice that everything remains consistent and very well in balance. Something we really appreciate in the finance world is where you have growth, but also consistency. And that's exactly what we're seeing so far this year. Year-to-date revenues are up just over $4.2 million. Or 4.7% at $94.1 million year-to-date. Year-to-date expenditures are up $4.1 million or 4.1% at $103.1 million. Both revenues and expenditures are tracking within 1% of last year's budget to actual performance. So again, very consistent and very true with budget expectations. Going off slide for a minute, you talked a little bit about financing a parking ramp. Something that would be noteworthy is that this month we are prepaying in another enterprise fund, landfill state revolving fund note. So you'll see that next month. Landfill will, either October, November, will be debt-free. Landfill is another enterprise fund like the parking enterprise. Consumers that use the landfill support the landfill by the charges for service, and so they are the beneficiaries of prepaying the note. Just over $900,000 was prepaid. The other note, there's two notes outstanding. The other note was paid off as a normal part of its life cycle, so that one was coming to an end anyway, and they had the cash available to prepay the last note, saving some interest. There's also a TIF note outstanding next year that the increments are coming in faster than expected, that we may also start to make some prepayments next year, budgeted to make those payments. And so with that, I'll conclude my remarks and stand by for questions.
Questions? Councilor Rolfe?
Tom, thank you for the report. I notice our available fund balance budget to budget, our reserve at 24.7% instead of at 25, where it now sounds very small, but that's still a significant amount of money. I'm assuming that is because the property tax money has not come in yet.
You'll see that change in October, or mainly November, when we receive our big property tax payments. Yep.
That's what I gleaned out of this, and I wanted to make sure I was correct.
Unless something significantly changes, that 27.1% kind of sets the floor as to where we budgeted. So as we are tracking right on budget expectations, and we certainly don't expect to use all of that fund balance that we did appropriate, you'll be somewhere north of that percentage by year end if all things continue as expected.
Always important.
Yes.
Counselor Jamison.
Tom, nice to have you here.
Hey, nice to be back.
Question though on the bond rating of the city. Do you happen to know what our rating is and where we've been and how high it could go?
We're at a AA2, which is on our sales tax revenue bonds. We do not have any GO debt outstanding. A lot of entities are rated on GO debt, so you hear AAA ratings, AA1 ratings, a lot of times on general obligation debt, which pledges the full faith and credit of the city. In this case, we just have sales tax revenue backed solely by the sales tax revenue bonds for those that are on SRF notes. The AA2 is a very, very good rating. We like to make a AA1, yes, but I'm not sure how they look at the sales tax revenue specifically, because we don't pledge anything beyond that. So that's a pretty high bar to climb to get to a AA1.
And is that the top?
AAA will be the top.
Okay.
You have AAA, AA1, then a AA2.
So we're pretty close.
So we are pretty close to the top.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Tom, I have one. Oh, Counselor Rothman, please.
Under the Event Center Construction Fund, page 5, we've got $1.5 million left in there. Does that include the $1 million that we will be receiving or have received as part of the compensation for the siting?
I don't know if we've received that yet or not. I would have to take a look to see once where that is at.
Okay,
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Other questions?
But again, the total is 3.8. The 2.3 is being held in trust. That's still bond construction dollars, so.
Right.
Okay, other questions? Okay, Tom, I have one.
Okay.
It's on my favorite subject always, the arterial street funding. Of the sales tax, it shows year-to-date for 2015 at $7,260,379.
What page are you on?
Page 12. Sorry. Can you give me a breakdown on that? Is this now the 08 combined with the .92? Or is this just all 08 by itself? Is that something you need to get back to me on? You can't,
I believe at this time that would just be, I'm going to look back on a previous page to see if we break out that .08, and we don't. Yeah, I believe that would be all sales tax money, not just the .08. That would be .08 and the
.92
balanced out by another .92 money, because again, the way it's set up is we'll use up the .08, we'll use up all the platting fees that come in that year, get into the .08, and spent beyond that comes out of the rest of that penny. So this would obviously be beyond that, so it would include both.
Could you get me a breakdown on what the .08 is generating?
Just the .08?
Yes,
Sure.
sir. Thank you.
Yeah, we used to have it on here, but.
Well, we used to, but I remember that we had a discussion on that, and that I believe that we combined
Yes, we did.
that .92 with the .08.
Correct.
So I'd still like to see what that breakdown is, though. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Tom. Yep. Any other subjects that need discussion at this time? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.